Hey everyone, welcome to the Func Med Nation podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Steve Noseworthy. The views and opinions of guests on this podcast are their own and may differ from my own. But as always, I try to be respectful of other people's opinions, even when we might disagree. Dr. Joseph Smith holds a Bachelor of Science in Psychology from North Dakota State University, and he received his Doctor of Chiropractic degree from Northwestern Health Sciences University. He is a board-certified chiropractic neurologist with multiple diplomate and fellowship designations through organizations such as the American Chiropractic Neurology Board, the American College of Functional Neurology, the American Board of Child Developmental Disorders, the American Board of Neurochemistry and Nutrition, as well as the International College of Applied Kinesiology. He's been an international speaker since 2008, presenting on applied kinesiology, clinical nutrition, and complex case management. He's the founder of Atlas Health, where his clinical work emphasizes the intersection of neurological, metabolic, immune, and endocrine networks. Dr. Smith is also the creator of Nuvius, which is an upcoming series of seminars that will teach attendees how to blend a basic neurological exam with in-exam nutritional interventions to assess real-time responses. This allows clinicians to translate complex systems care into structured, repeatable clinical workflows, simplify protocols, and reduce the time it takes for clients to see results. Let me say that Nuvius is not a muscle testing seminar series, but it's a blending of higher order functional medicine and functional neurology made accessible to those who don't have a background in either. Dr. Smith also hosts the podcast A Good Man and Thorough, where he translates emerging health research and clinical concepts into practical frameworks that can be applied to real-world cases. This conversation has been a long time coming. And I was going back through texts that you and I have gone back and forth with over the years. And I remember it was 2022. And I know that because of the timestamp. And I was teaching in California. I can't remember what the topic was, but you took time out of your schedule to come hang with me in the hotel lobby for a while. And we just sat and chatted for a couple of hours. And that was when I was like, dude, I need to get this guy on my podcast because he's got a lot of really cool stuff to say. And so, like I said, this has been a long time coming. And I do apologize it's taken so long. It took 4 years for us to actually get things together. But in a way, I'm kind of happy, Joe, because we got a lot to talk about. Like, you've got a new seminar coming up, and let me just say at the outset for people who are listening, Joe and I both are independent contractors with Apex Energetics, right? We're not employees, but we do teach for them. And you have created a seminar or a seminar series that you're going to be rolling out later this year. And we'll get to that. That'll be probably the last half of the conversation, but I don't want people to think that this is like an ad for Apex Energetics or that, they're underwriting the episode. This is not that at all. It's just me, as a fellow colleague, intensely interested in what you've put together. Because I've been around you enough over the years to understand what kind of a mind that you had. And, you reminded me when we were talking last week that, and you said it was one of the best compliments anyone had ever paid to you. And it wasn't my intent. I was just making a comment about your thought process. You're very much a lateral thinker. And I'm glad that you took that as a compliment rather than, saying like, what the heck does he actually mean about that? So anyways, I'm rambling kind of in a monologue, but I'm happy that you're here. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. And I got to say the timing of this is really good because so much has changed in my stance as a clinician since we spoke that I think now is like a really good time to really get into it. Yeah.
Yeah, and like I said, we'll get to that. But before we do, I want to spend some time just talking about your background and your evolution as a clinician. And I recognize what you're saying about so many things have changed, and that's certainly true since I've been in the game of functional medicine. But I want to go back even before that because you and I are both chiropractors. I don't, forgive me, I don't remember whether or not you actually have your diplomate in neurology. I think you do, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I have my diplomate in a couple of
so we share that. And this is like, it seems to be a common theme, at least among a subsection of people doing functional medicine is looking at this combination of func neuro and func medicine. But bring me back to, because, I have my own origin story, but what was it that led you to become a chiropractor in the beginning? And then I want to kind of track your journey, if you will, from that to being, hooked by functional neurology and then getting introduced to functional medicine and see how that flow worked. So, like, were you one of these guys that grew up going, I'm going to be a chiropractor?
No, not at all. In fact, I had no idea what I wanted to do when I graduated high school. So I was like, okay, maybe I'll be like a school psychologist or something. So I got into psychology, and my mentor at the time he committed suicide.
Ooh.
And so I was like, well, I don't know that I want to do this anymore. And my roommate at the time, his dad was a chiropractor. So I'm like, oh, tell me more about that. And I was an athlete at the time, and there was a chiropractor that would come and adjust the athletes and help them get ready to compete. And I'm like, wow, that's kind of cool. So I decided to check that out and ended up enrolling in Northwestern Health Sciences University a couple years later.
Yeah. Is that the area that you grew up in?
I grew up in the Midwest. Yeah, I'm from Jamestown, North Dakota originally, about 100 miles from Fargo.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. Eh? So where along the way, because I think back about when I was in chiropractic school, I started doing the Carrick Institute courses in I think it was my final year. So that by the time I graduated, started practicing, I had another year of learning left before I could sit for boards. Where did you catch the bug for the Func neuro stuff?
Well, it's funny. Our colleague Datis Karazian, he was in California. He was in the Bay Area one time. I went to one of his seminars, and I had been following him and really had learned a lot from him. He was a good mentor of mine, and we went out to. He invited me to dinner one night after the seminar, and it was so funny because at the time I was driving this Saab, and the window wouldn't roll down. So we got to the area where the arm at the hotel has to come up, and I have to roll the window down to put the ticket in.
Yeah.
And I had to excuse myself and get out of my car with my mentor sitting next to me to open the car door to get the arm up. But it was around that time that he was talking to me about neurology, and I just in the functional medicine part of things, I was doing really good work and I was seeing really amazing changes with people, but there were just some people that I was working with that I would give them what looked like the proper intervention, and they would implement it to a T. And instead of getting better, nothing would happen, or they might get dizzy or nauseous. They might even get vertigo, or they might get anxious. And the stuff that we were trying to diminish or help them alleviate actually wouldn't change or get worse. And so that's kind of when I learned from him that I needed to learn about the brain and how nutrition, when done right, it can improve energy and increase energy, but that energy can impact the maladapted system too. So if the issue neurologically or anywhere else in the body that's driving the malady also gets more energy, sometimes that system still wins. And so being able to understand how the brain fits in the hierarchy of systems became really important for me as the next step in my growth as a clinician.
So you came into where you are now. You went through the Func Med door first, and then started learning brain, which is, I mean, it's not uncommon, but it seems to be less common than the other way, where a lot of the people who are trained in brain eventually hear about or dedicate themselves to functional medicine.
Totally. Actually started in applied kinesiology, right? So that's totally to me, that was in it. George Goodhart had this saying, diagnose the need, supply the need, observe the result. And so that's when I started first learning about nutrition. And actually I found Dr. Karazian because he was also a diplomate in applied kinesiology. And I thought he was going to teach me how to do some cool muscle testing for supplements, for hormones. And as it turns out, that's not what he taught me at all that weekend. He taught me the limitations of muscle testing, and not to necessarily throw the baby out with the bathwater, but that's when I really started to appreciate the lab testing and how objective data can be very useful when, say, for example, the muscle test actually made somebody strong. Somebody could test strong with iodine, but they have Hashimoto's, and that's probably not a good idea for them, right? So
Right.
to be able to have the objective data to know exactly what's going on adds so much to the model that that's how I got into functional medicine. But then again, of course, he also helped me get into functional neurology.
Yeah. Yeah. And and I don't have a background in AK, but I certainly have a respect for it. And the people that I know, I guess the people that I'm closest to professionally that do it say the same thing, that it's not the end all be all. If I had one complaint about people who practice AK as a soul, that's their thing. That's the silo that they live in. I wonder how many other things that they're missing from a clinical perspective, right?
I think that could be true for anybody that specializes in something. And that's for me, I feel like sometimes I feel like I get really involved in organizations and really appreciate the technology and the value of that tool. But then also like I see the value of other tools and sometimes that isn't necessarily supported within that organization.
Yep.
And so, yeah, I think the tool can be the greatest strength or the greatest weakness if we're only relying on it, right? They say if all you see is all you have is a hammer, everything you see is a nail. And so I think for us, being cross-trained is really important.
Yeah, and that raises kind of a larger issue, and one of the things that I wanted to ask your opinion about, and this is really just kind of stems from my own thought process and my own evolution as a practitioner, is that we all deal with like these domains of knowledge. Like there are things that you know that you know. There are things that you know that you don't know. Like I know that I don't know how to build a rocket that's going to take someone to the moon, right? I know I don't know that. But then there's that whole mystery blind spot of you don't know what you don't know. And you're probably familiar with the Dunning-Kruger effect.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. For anyone listening who doesn't know what that is, that these are two, I think they were sociologists, but they published on this effect where, someone learns enough about a subject to feel like they know a lot, but in fact, they know a lot less than they really do. And so they try to come off as an expert, in fact, end up kind of looking like a little bit of a fool because there are people who know more than what they know. And I think that this is kind of especially in today's functional medicine environment, where things have become so complicated and complex in terms of patient presentation, in terms of our still burgeoning understanding of how our choices mix with environment and genetics. Like it's almost like the more we know that we don't know, right? And so this is kind of like a pitfall of growing as a clinician is to understand that we all have blind spots, and I'm including myself in that. Like I don't want anybody to think that, I don't know, just because I have a podcast or just because I teach seminars that I know everything. And in fact, I try to do my best to remember every time I teach a seminar to say, listen, I make mistakes. I don't know everything. If somebody asks me a question, my answer might be, I don't know. Right. But maybe I'll be able to figure that out. So how have you grappled with that yourself as you've continued to grow clinically?
Oh, man, it's such a great question. I mean, the Dunning-Kruger, all we have to do is go onto Instagram and you can just see that playing out. I mean, it's just like, it's such an interesting time and it's understandable. People want answers. And, what's interesting is the logarithm supports being an authority and being confident. So like this Dunning-Kruger thing, it's like people just go on there with like one fact that they're so sure of. And because they're so sure of it, they can communicate that.
Yeah.
And even in the world of like biohacking, right? Like, yeah, where else in like medicine is there optimization? Such an emphasis. So I love that. But the idea of optimizing without understanding its impact on other systems can actually be extremely dangerous. So I think your point is like, for me, it's the more I know, the more I don't know. But the more I also appreciate the interaction of systems. So my first goal is to keep people safe, to try to understand where they are. And then also I have become more humble as I've gotten, further along in practice because I'm less sure that I'm right, but I'm also able to say, yeah, I don't know, but our job is to go figure it out, I think, as clinicians. Like,
and that's really like as a clinician, right? Someone's coming to you and they're willing to pay you money for the things that you can do for them. it's kind of it's a difficult thing to say to somebody I don't know, right? Because there's that fear that you're going to lose that person. Let's say it's an initial consultation. They come to you with a complicated case, and I've seen 17 other doctors, and I call it the Obi-Wan Kenobi effect. Like you're my final hope, Obi-Wan.
All right, no pressure.
Yeah, but it's really hard to kind of sit in that place of let's just say sit in that place of humility and admit that you don't know, and but still present yourself as someone who might have potential solutions, right? Go ahead. I was going to keep going, but go ahead. Weigh in on that.
It's so true. I mean, the other side of that is folks that have seen so many doctors that were absolutely so sure of themselves and have been burned also, and not burned like intentionally. Like, I don't think that doctor intentionally burned them. Okay. But like doctors that are operating out of kind of a rigid protocol, and are doing what they do, and they're not really adapting to the patient's presentation, maybe as much, or maybe they don't see what they don't see. And look, this happens to me too. But the idea is like, when things don't go as expected, the question isn't like, what did the patient do wrong, or are they screwed? Yeah. How did they fail the model? The question is, how can we update the model, or do we need to update the model to understand how to adjust it to meet them where they're at? And it's like, it's okay to say you don't know. And patients that are so used to doctors being so sure of themselves and being burned by that confidence and that hope, some of them are just like crushed. They get to the point where they've seen so many people, they don't even know if they can do it. And that becomes its own unfortunate side effect of seeing so many people that they had belief in. So when somebody actually says, I don't know, but let me go figure that out, man, that actually resonates really, really highly with some of those folks.
Yeah. And I think that kind of fits really well into, like if we confine our thought process and discussion just to functional medicine for a second, Jeff Bland was the father of functional medicine. And he, laid out all these concepts and principles that I think we all agree with, like systems biology and whole person care, and how things are interconnected. And I don't think that any of us would disagree that these are kind of our guiding concepts and principles. But even if you give assent to all of these kind of defining elements, those ideas still have to translate into some kind of a clinical framework and a clinical approach, right? And this is kind of getting towards, I don't think we're there yet in the conversation, but talking about your seminar, but let's kind of stay big picture for a second. And I have one specific question, and then I want to get a little bit more general, because you, like me, blend functional medicine and functional neurology in clinical practice, right? And we're seeing more and more of this. Do you see those as separate things?
No, not at all. In fact, every modality that ever exists that we know about is part of a holistic model. Every single tool in it, just picture like a carpenter's like shed. They have so many tools.
Yeah.
And to say that I'm a hammer practitioner.
Yeah.
I'm a saw practitioner. I think my biggest transition as a clinician is I became an artist instead of a problem solver.
Or a technician, maybe.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's not to say that problem solving and being a technician is somehow less than what I'm doing, but it's to say that what I'm doing now, I feel as an architect and as an artist, and creating a model for each person as they walk in encompasses all of those things. And so the art is to figure out what the right thing is at the right time and the right amount for long enough by using pattern recognition, and then being able to be aware of how the pattern is shifting as they shift. Then the therapies actually need to shift as they shift as well.
Yeah. Why do you think we as practitioners tend to silo ourselves and define ourselves as, well, I do functional medicine, I don't know anything about the brain? And I'll bring it up this way. I was just in California a couple of weeks ago when I taught Apex's brain chemistry course, the Master in Brain Chemistry course. And, when you teach the same seminar over and over again, like we do, over the last 15, 17, 18 years, I think I've been doing this, you kind of develop like an introduction that you use for every seminar. And when it comes to the brain seminar, because it is historically the least well-attended seminar that Apex has created, I might argue it's perhaps the most important one. But nevertheless, it's the least well-intended because I think that there are a lot of people out there that, of course, we all know that we have brains, and we all know that all of our patients have brains, but we don't come out of our basic training, whether you're a chiropractor, a medical doctor, osteopath, naturopath, acupuncturist, I don't care what your background is, none of us learned the brain when we were in school. We might have done some neuroanatomy, maybe talked about neuropathology, but we were never taught how the system functions, and we're certainly never taught how it interacts with the endocrine and immunological systems, and those three things together form, let's call it master control.
Yeah, neuroendocrine-immune.
Exactly, neuroendocrine immunology, right? And so why do you think we have this tendency to go to kind of put up those barriers to say, well, I do functional medicine, I don't do functional neurology?
I think some of that is external forces. We must declare who we are so people have a sense of what service we can provide. I think that's part of it. And then part of it is people just gravitate towards what they like and are interested in.
Yeah.
And then, so some of it's internal. This is who I am. This is what I do. I have colleagues like that, and I respect that. They're like, this is what I do. If it works, great. If it doesn't work, then these other things are available. I love that. I do feel that it's some of it is like in the world, people need to know what services you're providing. So ascribing a name to what you do gives them some semblance of what that could be. But if you say you're a chiropractor, I mean, that's the biggest complaint from one of them from like standard medicine about chiropractic is like, what are you getting when you see a chiropractor? There are so many different types of chiropractors, right? There are so many different approaches to low back pain. But if you go in with high cholesterol, standardized medicine is going to have a pretty standard approach, right? This is like statin time.
Yeah.
And that's going to be, every practitioner is going to have something like that. I mean, look, there's a saying, if the shoe fits, wear it. If it doesn't fit you, then I'm not talking about you. Okay. So don't be insulted if your medical doctor doesn't prescribe statins, but we do know that there is a American Medical Association position on high cholesterol, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I agree with you. I think part of it is, it's how we talk to the public. Right. I'm a thyroid specialist. I'm a functional medicine person or whatever, but I'm a big believer that it's okay to have a difference between how you present yourself to the public and how you operate as a clinician. Right. And we all know that if you're advertising, niche advertising is much better than general. Like to say, well, I'm not just a thyroid specialist, but I deal with Hashimoto's. Right. That's a very clear, distinct message, which marketing and advertising kind of requires so that people understand what they're getting from you. But if I spend all my time, even if I spend all my time marketing, say for Hashimoto's, when someone walks into my office or jumps on a Zoom call with me, I better be the ultimate generalist. Right. I better be able to, I better be able to cast my net, my thought process very broadly, especially in the beginning, so that I'm trying to do my best to see that big picture and then over time start to cone it down to things that are relevant and functional. And it kind of raises another question that, I have my own thoughts, but I'm here to get your thoughts. So I'm going to do less talking and more listening. When you said you don't see functional medicine and functional neurology as different, what do you mean by that? How do they relate? So let's start there. And then I want to talk a little bit more about what your actual clinical framework is and how you arrived at it, because I'm pretty sure that the way you're practicing now is not what you were doing, say, 5 years ago, right? So let's start with how does functional medicine and functional neurology, how do they fit together? Do you see them as, in essence, the same thing, or do you see them as parallel tracks within maybe a larger container?
I think it's a great question. And you could get really broad with this, right? To the point where things aren't even true anymore. We do have to have some sort of like idea, an understanding of the map or the territory, right? Yeah. But like if we just took away my skull and took away my skin and took away my muscles and took away my bones, there would be a extremely strong connection between the brain and the gut, and they would not look separate. It would be one big mass of tissue that's connected, and it's one. But in our understanding of things, the way we learn is we have to have reference points of what is what, and then be able to attach meaning to it. So for us to learn, we have to be able to break things down and then attach meaning to it. So yes, like the medical model that basically loculates, as Dr. Brandon Brock used to say, it's very loculated. I was like, what does that mean? Okay, but it's very loculated. And so like they're specializing in one area. Okay, great. But that area obviously connects to another area. And so in a more holistic model, it's more like understanding, well, how does the brain interact with the gut on this spectrum? And how does the gut, for example, interact with the brain on a spectrum? And is the tipping point for this person, if we're going to just simplify it to gut and brain, for example, is it more of a brain problem causing a gut problem, or is it more of a gut problem causing a brain problem? And if so, how do we adjust our care plan and our recommendations and all the things that go along with that accordingly? And it's so useful to be able to make that distinction.
Yeah. And I think it's important for us clinically to have a clear model that we operate with, right? Yeah. Because when you sit down and you listen to someone's history, look at their diagnostics or exam findings, there's a lens that you're looking at all that through. And that lens is going to color how you interpret the information, and that ultimately is going to, color the recommendations that you make. And, going back to this idea of we don't know what we don't know, there's a question, I think, by extension, which is, if you were to look at how functional medicine is being practiced, not necessarily how Dr. Blend defined it back in the 90s, right? Because he was very clear about what functional medicine is. And obviously that model has been massaged and it's been tweaked, but the core itself is pretty much the same as the original formulation back in the early 90s, at least at a conceptual level. But when you look at any given clinician's biggest opportunity to become a better clinician, and I'm talking about people who say they practice functional medicine, whatever they might mean by that, because there's what it is and there's what we think it is as we do it. But if you were to look at any given clinician's greatest opportunity to become a better clinician, where do you think that opportunity resides? Do you think it is in finding a better supplement to fix the gut, or finding a pure version of a supplement, a quality supplement that they might already be using? Because this seems to be the pattern where a lot of the education that's happening in the functional medicine arena is about a new generation of some probiotic, a new generation of some kind of an antimicrobial, or a different way to look at the 4R protocol, right? So, and the reason why I'm asking this is because for myself, there have been, maybe what we could call watershed moments where that large blind spot of I don't know what I don't know got just a little bit smaller. And I started to see a bigger picture of how what I already knew or thought I knew fit into something larger. And one of those times was when I got hooked on neurology. I was like, oh, brain's kind of important. Let me start learning about that. The other one was when I was first exposed with functional medicine, like just at my first blood chemistry seminar. It opened a whole world for me, and it changed how I thought. So let me rephrase the question, because I want to be clear. Yeah. Any given clinician, what's their greatest opportunity to become better?
That's a great question. I think you kind of touched on it earlier, is you can only see what you can see. So training yourself to stop looking for things and to being able to see what's there without attaching meaning to it initially. Just make an observation, being able to make observations about what's there. Yeah. And suspend belief about what those observations mean, I think is one of the greatest skills a clinician can have, because they could see one thing that they know, and they go down that rabbit hole, but then they miss. It's like they're looking through a keyhole and they think they understand the entire mansion. And we're all trying to get better at this, right? It's like you could be a white belt in karate and you could be a fifth dan like black belt in karate, and you're still doing karate. But there's a level of mastery, and I feel like masters understand the limitation of the system that they're working with, and they can adapt and they can adjust and be creative with the application of the knowledge that they have to address whatever's coming their way. And I think that as a clinician, some of it is just getting the reps in and sticking with it and practicing. I think that a clinician needs to, if they want to be super relevant in 2026, they need to do more than the state required continuing education hours. I think, unless they're going to be practicing for 150 years, it's just there's a level of dedication, I think, required to being able to at least understand systems and how they integrate. Although a lot of people learn faster than me, so maybe not.
Mm. Yeah, and it's funny because I just did all of my Florida CEUs for my license just like last weekend, the weekend before.
Yeah.
And I hear you, and I think it's a valid point that if your only continuing education is what's required by the state, you're missing a whole bunch, because our industry has changed. Not even just talking about chiropractic, but talking about functional medicine and natural healthcare in general, whether you're chiropractors, naturopaths, whatever the case, doesn't really matter. But let me get your opinion. Like, what, in your opinion, what has changed in our industry, both on the patient side in terms of the types of people that are coming to see us, as well as on the clinical side in terms of how your particular model has evolved to where it is now?
Oh man, how much time do we have?
As much as we need.
So, boy,
let's start on the patient side. Like, what are you seeing now? And I think we probably have general agreement on this, but what are you seeing now compared to when you first started doing all this stuff?
Well, I don't know that patients are more complex, honestly, than they were, but I'm just seeing more. Okay. But what I can tell you is the patients I'm seeing now compared to the patients I was seeing when I started in my practice have had more experience with standard medicine, alternative medicine, and now like biohacking and neurohacking. And so a lot of them, unfortunately, are pretty beat down and pretty, they're motivated to get better, but like their belief, like their core belief, a lot of them, they may not believe, and at some level, they don't have any proof that they can. And so without that proof that they can, or if they've had some results and it's gotten bad again, I think part of what I find I'm up against is like at the level of belief and sometimes identity, and the identity that they can get better or maybe not get better. And so that becomes an area of investigation in my practice, for sure. That's different than it used to be.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. In fact, to the point where I added a couple of questions to my intake process and my intake form that asks about, hey, project 3 years down the road, and what do you think is possible, or where do you want to see yourself? And I'll even ask questions on the intake about their support system. Like, because you and I both know that you can have a case where, like, you can help them.
Yeah.
And you see a clear path, but either they're a glass half empty person, so they're always on the negative of things, or perhaps even worse is that they live in an environment where all the voices around them are negative, constantly telling them, like, why are you seeing that doctor? Why are you doing all this? It's never going to work. You're spending too much money. You're going to be sick for the rest of your life. And those are extremely difficult obstacles to overcome because of the influence of that negativity and that belief system on the neuroendocrine-immune super system, right? Because it affects everything.
100%. Yeah. And what's worse is sometimes it's not an external voice. Sometimes it's their own inner critic that's saying that. So they could be sitting there talking with us, and inside they're saying, this is never going to work. This is never going to work. And if we don't identify that as a clinician, we're just going to be that 14th or 15th or 20th doctor that failed to help them.
Yeah.
And it's such an important piece that I think we're not really taught. I wasn't taught in school. And what you're describing, some people metaprogramming wise, the way they model the world is they move away from what they don't like.
Yeah.
Okay. And so if we're talking to them about all the things that might help them and moving them towards like this goal, but they're oriented towards moving away from they don't like, we're going to lose that person.
Yeah.
But if we're talking about like, okay, if you don't do this, these bad things will happen, and they're more oriented towards moving towards what they would like, we're going to lose that person. We're going to be seen as a negative or a fear-based doctor. And so being able to adjust our communication style and identify the communication style or meta programming of the person that we're working with is extremely, extremely helpful as a clinician. It's one of the most important things I've learned in the last year.
Yeah, I think probably one of the earliest lies I remember being told as a doctor is that you're not a therapist.
Yeah.
Because I find myself being, engaging in some form of therapy all the time, and talking to people about their attitudes and their beliefs, and maybe even helping them try to strategize about, how do you quell that inner voice, that inner critic, and
Yeah.
how do you compensate for the non-supportive significant other who's always telling you that something's not going to work. I think, to be honest, I think we could do a whole podcast just on that topic, right?
Well, absolutely. Absolutely. And really what it boils down to for me as a systems person is for the patient presentation, the patient aspect that they're bringing, as you asked me, is there's a structure to their state of being.
Yeah.
There's a structure to their malady. There's a structure that we can identify. It's a pattern that has them there. And so, but this structure often is on top of another structure, which is, if you imagine like a rubber band around your back, pulling you towards the wall in front of you. And that structure says, I get what I want. Okay. And then there's another rubber band around your stomach that's pulling you towards the wall behind you saying, I don't get what I want. How many people do we see, Steve, that are, they have moments where they're moving towards what they want, and then they lose momentum, and then they get pulled back towards like somewhere in the baseline, like maybe not all the way back to their chief issue, but like somewhere close to that. And so I think that one of the fundamental issues with patients and with the model that exists is we're taught to the highest good is to find the cause. The highest good is to find the cause. But the approach there, even in the holistic model, the functional model, is to be focused on the problem. The problem. And so when we're creative as doctors, when we're creative, instead of like stabilizing this oscillating structure, okay, if you don't do this, these are the bad things that are going to happen to you. Or if you change your diet this way and you take this supplement and you make this lifestyle change, then you'll experience less pain and less fatigue. But they're still on that oscillating structure of they have or they have not. And what I got so good at was problem solving and stabilizing that structure. They'll see all these doctors and they hear the story, and their history becomes so complex. They can come in with like hundreds of pages of labs, and they've had doctors tell them how complex their case is and how difficult these feedback loops are to break. And then they're like, holy crap, this really is complex. And then they believe their doctors, and the doctor unknowingly trying to solve the problem is stabilizing the structure. But if you ask them what they want, they can say, I would like to have more energy. Okay, great. We're finding why they're fatigued. Cool. Okay. But then it's like, well, what will having that do for you? And they're like, oh, well, when I have more energy, then I can do this, this, and this. Oh, okay. So you would like this. And we move them off the oscillating structure of I have and I have not. And we are creative and we create a new structure with them. The structure of like maybe resiliency and being able to connect and stay in touch with your community, of pickleball or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
And so if they're moving in the direction of what they would like, and we help them with secondary decisions in getting there, and we move them off this oscillating structure where we're constantly asking them, how are you today? How's your fatigue? How's your depression? How's your IBS? How's your SIBO? Okay. And we say, well, hey, listen, how's it going with pickleball? How's it going with intimacy with your spouse? Okay. Were you able to travel and go see your kid's graduation from college? You know what I mean? And so we create this path of least resistance towards what they would like. But when we create that initial path of least resistance, that initial new structure, they have to be able to say, this is where I am. So all of those history findings and all the data points that we collect are still super important. Okay, this is where I am, but it's not accepting where you are. It's not resigning to the fact that you don't have what you want, but you say, okay, I acknowledge this is where I am. You have to be realistic about where you are in order to go where you need to go.
Yeah.
And then you identify where you want to go. And then you immediately feel the tension of this is where I am. This is where I'd like to go. I wake up every morning with vertigo and fatigue. I would like to be able to travel and go to Hawaii with my spouse for our anniversary. And right now, I don't think I can get on a plane. Okay, that's now a strategic moment in the path of least resistance towards what they want. It's not just evidence that they have a life that they don't want anymore. And that,
I love that,
that's
because
such an important thing.
Yeah, and I think you nailed it. Like, sometimes we inadvertently reinforce that negative plasticity of bad beliefs and woe is me and that internal criticism. And I'm just as guilty. And in fact, I'm thinking, like, somewhere along the way, the nugget of what you're talking about seeped into my brain, because in my intake form, I talk about, tell me your story. Like, there's your symptoms, and then there's your story. And the story is how your symptoms are affecting your quality of life and your goals and your hopes and your dreams.
Yes.
And I don't often enough, I really appreciate you bringing this up, because I've got to go back and re-engineer how I'm talking to clients during my consults.
And it's such a valuable thing. And we do it, Steve. If the better we are at problem solving, the more we actually are stabilizing that structure. Like even in prevention, what are we trying to prevent? Oh, I don't want to get cancer. I don't want to get dementia. I don't want to have a heart attack. Yeah. So we're constantly evaluating data within the frame of, are we moving towards that? And we're giving so much power to the problem in standard medicine, in alternative medicine, in biohacking. Whereas there's another model that exists, which is to move towards specifically what they would like and be artistic and create a model that meets them where they are, but also emphasizes this new structure and then helps them with the tension. Because if the tension is too great, initially the tension is so great, nothing could change. The discrepancy of where they are versus where they'd like to be. If it's too great, and as clinicians we don't manage them, then they'll just give up. Yeah. Then hopelessness and helplessness can set in, and that's no good either.
Yeah. I want to go back to a question, maybe a statement that I made earlier that I think we kind of veered off and went down this little wonderful bunny trail. Mm-hmm. You had used the term the neuroendocrine-immune system, right? I referred to it as the super system. And when I taught a couple of weekends ago in California, of course, the topic was the brain. And we start out by recognizing that none of us learn brain in our basic education. And so we have to kind of take it upon ourselves to go learn those things. And I think that most of us as clinicians have these decision points as we go through our careers, where we become aware of something different, something that we know that we don't understand. And maybe we have an inkling of how important it might be, but we don't really know how to get off the blocks and start to make that happen. And this is one of the reasons why I love teaching the brain seminar, is because you see the light bulbs going off all the time, because we're starting to fill that hole of, and I'll state it the way I said it to them. For the people that were there that particular weekend, I said to them that your greatest opportunity of becoming a better clinician is not better supplements, better this, better that. It's to start to learn about the brain. Now, we could also plug the immune system into there and talk about functional immunology, and that's its own topic worthy of its own discussion. But, we're here talking, and we're working our way towards talking about your seminar, which is, again, blending functional medicine and functional neurology doesn't sit well with me. I like to say it like that, because I, like you, don't see a difference between them. Right. I haven't made up my mind yet if I think of functional neurology as part of functional medicine, using medicine in a very umbrella term, or and I'll say what Datis said to somebody. I was overhearing him talk to somebody else years ago, and he was saying it drives him crazy when people draw a distinction between functional medicine and functional neurology. He said it's just being a good clinician. Right. And I think if we start at that really big picture thought process of brain hormones, and immunology run the show. And of those things, the brain is the only thing that has processing capabilities. And because of that, it puts the brain in charge, right? And so the brain uses hormones and, say, cytokines from the immune system to understand its own internal environment and to affect change within that, either responding to internal or external environment. That's where I am right now in terms of my clinical model. I would love it if you have any critique of that. And if you don't, great. What
Yeah.
kind of model are you operating under? And let's start working the conversation to this new seminar series you put together.
So the model is a systems model. So a neuroendocrine-immune is like a big aspect of that. You could also do like, there's also things like metabolic aspects of energy and energy production. And then there's like, macrobiology and microbiology. I mean, the thing is like we said earlier with the Dunning-Kruger effect, or however you say that, a person can start to sound a little holier than thou, when they're focusing on one aspect of it. And I definitely don't want to come off that way. I can say that I think that it's understanding systems, but also hierarchies. And that's the thing. It's hierarchies. So yes, like there's a gut issue. There's an immune system around the gut. There's a cardiovascular system. There's an immune system. We have a musculoskeletal system. Okay, we could say that the brain is superior, but like if you're missing part of your skull, maybe something else is going to take precedence. So the goal is to understand the optimal activity of each system for that person and for their age based upon their history, comparing it to like ideals and comparing it to like things that are so compromised that they're disease processes. So getting a sense of the territory, and then each system has its own localization within that territory. In functional neurology, we call it triangulating the level of the lesion. So a person could have depression because like their frontal lobe isn't working. Well, is their frontal lobe not working because the frontal lobe is injured? Is it not working because the signal that delivers neurotransmitter to the frontal lobe, that little pathway from the brainstem, if that isn't working, then they also will have depression. So like if you do like transcranial magnetic stimulation to stimulate the frontal lobe and a person has a frontal lobe issue, they're going to feel better.
Yeah.
But if you do transcranial magnetic stimulation with somebody that has a connection issue where their brainstem or other structures that fire into that area are not working, then doing transcranial magnetic stimulation might actually overwhelm and basically fatigue that part because it's not actually being fed by structures that are underneath it. So being able to use an exam to triangulate where the nidus or the biggest problem is, and then understanding like fiber optic cable, those Christmas lights, where they look like a squid, and then there's just like lights all over the wall. So like there are these areas that one area has a bunch of fiber optic cables that go to other areas, and so the game in functional neurology is to understand where is the key like light that is out. So Griswold on a Christmas Vacation, he pulled these huge lights, okay, and he had to untangle the lights, and he turned the switch on, and none of the lights came on. So he's like, okay, well, where's the problem? So are the lights not on, and the person's depressed because there's a problem with the bulb, or in this case, there was a problem with the circuit that was being overwhelmed in the garage, and so when that circuit was turned on properly, then everything downstream happened. And so much of conventional medicine is to say, well, the problems, with depression is that there's not enough serotonin. But somebody might do worse on a serotonin medication, but then do well on a Wellbutrin medication, which is dopamine. Okay, well, that person has a dopamine type depression. Might it be because the networks that respond to dopamine are injured, or might it be because that person's having a problem producing dopamine?
Yeah.
Or are they having a problem delivering dopamine? And so that opens up from a clinician's perspective. It's like, wow, if they do better on Wellbutrin, then we know this is a dopamine problem, and it basically excludes a ton of networks that are not the problem, and it helps us localize where we can more effectively do some sort of rehab strategy to increase the output of that area and improve their function.
Yeah, I totally get it. And I think that little example you were saying about frontal lobe maybe not firing because something in the brainstem where we create neurotransmitters that circuitry is not working well.
Mhm.
I think that applies to like all the vagal stimulation that's very fond of being done and being promoted and being talked about as if that's going to fix everything. Right.
I know.
And so like to help people understand that the vagus, as important as it is one component of a much more complicated structure. And there are things downstream and upstream from the vagus. Right.
Yes.
And so and I love, and I'm assuming, and I am assuming that this is part of what you're like a need that you're trying to meet with the seminars, right? And so why don't we just kind of talk about, let's go into it. Like and I think I think you mentioned the name, the seminar series is, and it is a series, right? It's not just a standalone, correct?
Yeah, it's a series, but each module could be a standalone. So a
Yeah.
person doesn't need to attend all three to become more fluid in their understanding of neurology and nutrition and the interface. But at the end of all three modules, there'll be a level, like each one builds on this other one, but each one also is its own unique seminar. So there's value to attending all three, but it's not necessary.
Yeah, and you call it Nuvius with a V, right? Nuvius?
Yeah, Nuvius.
Nuvius, where'd the
Nuvius.
name come from?
Oh, it's something that we spent a lot of time on. And the idea was to create a name that was more than just like describing what it is. Yeah. So it was actually a lot of stuff behind the scenes to come up with that name. And also there are a lot of things that already have names. So we tried a lot of other names that unfortunately were already taken. But the idea was there's something about a novel approach and how to see what's happening. Yeah. So new and how to see vias. Yeah. So the idea is like what the mind once expanded can't return to its original dimensions. And so the idea is to teach clinicians maybe how to see what they look at every day, but attach meaning to it in a way that's useful to them.
Right. Exactly. So let me ask you, before we get into some of the nitty gritty of the seminar themselves and the content, what was going on in your own practice and in your thought process that led you to start doing this stuff in your practice? And then where along the way did you say, like, I need to start sharing this, or I think this would be something of value that I could bring to the Func Med, Func Neuro community?
Yeah. So where I was it was about, I don't know, maybe 15 or more years ago, Dr. Karazian created these formulations that were like sprays and creams and like liquids. And so I also had seen the Mastering Brain Chemistry seminar. And before I was a speaker, I was kind of a speaker in training. And so I did tech support for that seminar. And it's a freaking amazing seminar. But what I noticed is that people are extremely overwhelmed with the brain. They just feel like neurology is just like way too much to take in. Yeah. And so just this idea that it's overwhelming almost like precludes them from like just being like, all right, I'm not gonna learn all that. And there's almost like a resignation, or there's an extreme interest in it. But then sometimes, having 300 hours or more to dedicate to learning a program that has the clinical applications at the end isn't always easy to sign up for. So I wanted to create the original idea with Nuvius was it's a clinical application seminar for the Mastering Brain Chemistry, which is to say, okay, we talked about neurotransmitters, we talked about different regions of the brain. How about we teach people a very straightforward, streamlined way of testing each one of these areas of the brain, and then using nutrition as a way to improve the function. And that's basically where it came from. There's this huge need for doctors who are either overwhelmed by data points to go, well, where do I start? Yeah. Okay. Or people that have all these different tools. Okay. But then they're not exactly sure which tool to use and when. And so having a system of being able to identify in a system of hierarchy, where is the lever that's going to get the greatest response, and then being able to measure it in real time so that it will work, and then also to figure out how much to give of that particular remedy is kind of the next level of a lot of people that are already understanding clinical nutrition, but are looking to figure out another application for it.
Yeah, and this is like you point out this overwhelm phenomena, and I do think it's rooted in the fact that we just don't learn enough about the brain and our collective basic training. And even when you start to learn out, like my opinion, and this is just my opinion, I think the immune system's more complicated than the brain. I think the brain, once you understand fundamental principles, and how it's organized and how communication happens, I think it's a lot easier to learn the brain than it is to learn about the mechanics of immunology. Now, having said that, you cannot separate them because they're just different facets of the central neuroendocrine-immune system, right? It's all just different parts of the same thing.
Yeah.
And so, like I appreciate you pointing out this idea of overwhelm, and my experience has been in teaching the brain chemistry course for the last, I don't know, 15 years or so, however long it's been, that people have this attitude of, well, I do functional medicine, I don't do functional neurology. Or they might say something like, well, I don't have a brain-based practice. And now
Right.
to that, here's what I say to that. When I was in my first year as a chiropractor, we had an instructor who was kind of like an old Midwestern gruff, like almost looked like he just came off the farm to come teach a class. He was a wonderful guy. And one of the guys in our class asked him one day, like, how do we know if somebody needs chiropractic care? And the answer was, well, do they have a spine? Right. And so to the clinicians who think I don't have a brain practice, I would ask the question, do your patients have brains?
Exactly.
And what are you really defining? Like, what qualifies you as a practitioner or your practice as being a brain-based practice or not? Is it only if you deal with concussion? Is it only if you deal with autism or schizophrenia? So speak to that for me, if you will, like the seminar that you're going to be teaching, and we'll dive. I'll ask you to give me some more specifics because I love where this is going.
Yeah. Well,
but how would you help people position the seminar in their minds and to get to the point where they understand, well, I have a brain practice too?
Yes. Okay. So first of all, there are some amazing functional neurology courses out there, and I've done them. I've done almost all of them and almost every hour of them, and they are amazing. And so I would never say as a clinician, I want to poo-poo these other classes. Okay. But what I tried to do here was make it accessible. And I got to say, like, the first weekend, there are 12 exam findings, 12. And half the weekend is going to be practicing how to evaluate them.
Nice.
And what I've learned in practice and as a teacher is that I can give, first of all, in practice, there are base foundational exam findings. Like some of these are like really, if you ever seen Reno 911, okay, where they're doing the DUI stop, okay, and they're doing all this stuff, okay. Like a DUI checkpoint stop is a wonderful evaluation of the cerebellum. It looks at balance, it looks at eye tracking, it looks at motor coordination. And so like these are standardized things that people really understand and can learn very quickly. And just being able to get a handle on these first 12 exam findings as the basis of where the brain might be contributing to the person's like gut issue or pain issue or like chronic muscle tightness issue could absolutely transform your practice. And the foundation, back to your question earlier, of this course is the concept of allostasis. Okay, all these systems, they have a homeostasis mechanism, which is the return to balance, right? Okay, but how do we actually engage in homeostasis? That process is called allostasis, and that is directed by the frontal lobes. So people that have brain fog, or they have anxiety, or they have depression, or they have ADHD, or they may have autism, they may have dyslexia, they may have balance issues, they may have numbness and tingling in their body somewhere not related to peripheral nerve or weakness. They may have evidence of a neurological system that isn't working. And not only is it not working, creating those symptoms, the capacity to engage in allostasis, which is to return the body back to balance, is offline. So as a clinician, if we fail to appreciate the brain's positioning in the hierarchy and we give them the perfect supplement or the perfect application of our Chinese medicine or the perfect naturopathic protocol or whatever it is, like you did it perfectly, if the brain cannot organize that new information into something that actually allows a corrective process from it, and they are stuck in the stress chemistry or they're stuck in a nervous system regulation that does not allow or doesn't have the capacity to heal, it will not work. And that's the foundation of Nuvius, is to understand that the frontal lobe directs healing, and not necessarily that it's the number one cause of why they're there, but a little attention to the frontal lobe and what makes the frontal lobe work might unlock the body's healing capacity to heal itself, rather than being the doctor and having to figure everything out. If we can unlock the innate healing vitalistic process by having a little understanding of the brain, it can go a long way. It's amazing.
Yeah, and I think it's a little bit of a foreign concept to people, to think that the brain's involved in sensing the body's internal environment. Like, you think about the brain, and you could probably easily understand, well, if I hear something, I hear that through my ears with my temporal lobe, like my auditory contact or cortex.
Sure.
I see light goes through my eyeballs, and I see it with my occipital cortex. But there's a whole class of, let's say, sensing capabilities called interoception.
Right.
Which is the brain's ability to understand what's happening. And we can even break that down further into a whole bunch of different subcategories, like immunoception, which is the brain's ability to know what's happening with your immune system and to help to coordinate its responses. And this is why I think it's so important for people who are listening to you and maybe thinking about coming to one of these seminars, is to understand that the brain is intimately involved in understanding, I don't know, call it biological balance, homeostasis and allostasis, not only from a sensing standpoint, but from a regulatory and like an input-output standpoint, right? And is that kind of where you're coming from with all this?
1,000%. I mean, anybody that is like, well, what does it really have to do with it? If you've ever drank the water in Mexico and got food poisoning, or you drank something with giardia in it, you understand chemoreception. So the brain perceives the immune activation, and it says diarrhea and vomit, diarrhea and vomit, diarrhea and vomit. That is an allostatic mechanism designed to bring you back to homeostasis. But when the brain is offline, let's say a person could vomit and have diarrhea, but if there wasn't enough allostatic mechanism after the acute crisis to close the deal, and there was like what seems like a subclinical or stealth aspect of that left, the brain is still going to perceive that, but it doesn't have the army to seal the deal. And so now that becomes the basis of their chronic issue. And they do all the gut programs. And, I'm from the Midwest, like we're saying, and there's a saying, you can do it till the cows come home. It's funny, they leave. And then you look out the window and yes, they've come home. They come back. Okay. But you could do biofilm disruption and you can do 4-hour program. Okay. But if there's not enough vagal signaling, or that the allostatic mechanism is broken, so the vagal signaling isn't happening, okay, then vagal stim even isn't going to work, because allostasis still needs to be able to coordinate and direct that in a way that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. So would you say that this, like you stated earlier, that the problem that you were, at least this is what I heard, I don't know if you actually said it, but the problem you were trying to solve was to give clinicians practical applications of the brain chemistry course that we've historically taught.
Yes.
Does that mean that people coming to your seminar need to take that brain course first? Or can this be a feeder? Could it go the other direction? They come see you first and then, go find someone else who's teaching the brain course. Like, how does that work in your mind?
Well, I would say people that understand the Apex model are going to love this. Okay. Because they already have the foundation. They already understand that there's research behind the formulations. They already understand the lab assessments.
Yeah.
Imagine like you're a clinician, somebody walks in your office, they've seen 20 doctors. They have evidence of neuroinflammation. They have brain fog. You look at their labs, they have really high homocysteine. They have really high CRP. And they're like, okay, so maybe something that blocks acute phase reactants and lowers homocysteine could be useful. Okay. But then you're like, well, you look at the history and they've already done that stuff. They've already done turmeric or resveratrol, or they've already done B12, and like it like something's missing. And then you look at their intake form and you see, wow, there's parts of their brain that aren't functioning very well. Okay. They're sensitive to light and sound. They're not sleeping very well. They have numbness and tingling in their body. they have acid reflux, and you're like, wow, this person's got some brain stuff going on. And then you do an exam, and you find during the exam, you can localize to the area of the frontal lobe that isn't working, that's contributing to that, and the area of the brainstem that isn't working. And then you give nutrition to support the level of the brainstem and the frontal lobe, and all of a sudden those exam findings go away. So for example, if we go to like the cerebellar exam we talked about earlier, somebody who is doing like a roadside test, how many people will tell you that they couldn't pass a roadside test for a DUI sober? And they laugh about it. And you're dude, you're like, dude, I mean, yes, that's funny, but also like, do you realize that means
it's sad.
that part of your brain is already like completely dysfunctional? Yeah. And the fiber optic cable from that part of your brain goes to so many other parts of your brain, and atrophy is actively happening as a result of that. And so if we can identify and connect an exam finding with the allostatic mechanism, and we support allostasis, say, for example, we give them a neurotransmitter support, and their balance, instead of like falling to the left, they don't fall anymore. You're like, oh, wait a minute. I don't have to have them come back in a month after taking this to see if something worked. I can know right there on the spot whether or not this is going to help them with that mechanism. And okay, well, what if they were given resveratrol and turmeric, but like you give them resveratrol at the bedside and their exam gets worse, but then you give them turmeric and everything gets better. Oh, okay, cool. So like I gave them, based on my understanding of acute phase reactants, things that would lower inflammation. But as it turns out, something was off with that supplement that had resveratrol for that person that could work totally for another person, or maybe even for this person at a different time. But you can identify right there whether or not it's going to work. And then you can figure out, well, how much of this is going to work?
Right.
So rather than just giving them the supplements that make sense, that are research-based, and it's awesome to do that. Like, this is a beautiful clinical model. You identify the mechanism, you give the supplement, you retest the labs and see what's changed. The next level of that augments so beautifully is what's going to work for this patient in that moment, and a little bit of attention to the frontal lobe's capacity to engage in allostasis, so that the supplements actually find a nervous system that can take that and utilize it, rather than they just don't change. Yeah. Which is so much of what we see with chronic cases. Like, the more chronic the case, the more stabilized that system is, and the more attention we need to figure out, well, why is that? Rather than just diving in with another protocol. And that's what Nuvius is designed to do. And furthermore, students in classes that, for example, mastering brain chemistry, that class is aged so well. It's aged like fine wine. I mean, it's such a beautiful class. But at the end of the class, people are so overwhelmed, some of them, with like all the awesome information, that they're like, after day one, they had confidence. You've seen this, Steve. After day one, people are like, okay, I get the neurotransmitters. Okay. And then day two, you're getting into like things like maybe vascular and homocysteine. They're like, okay, this makes sense to me. And then boom, we start getting into like pHs, and we start getting into liver, and we start getting into cardiovascular brain. And by the end of the weekend, they're like, wait, what did I remember on Friday? Okay. And then the learning and the application takes place for the clinician that feels confident enough to order which lab. And then they still have to wait a month or 6 weeks sometimes till they get the data to intervene. And then they're like, okay, what did I remember the day after the seminar? Okay. And so you see people taking the seminar multiple times to master that. But in Nuvius, half the weekend is going to be learning the exam, practicing it on one another, and then I'll teach everybody how to select the nutrition that's going to work for that person, and then trial that to see if it worked. And then if that doesn't work, how to figure out the secondary and tertiary remedy that could work, and then how to measure that. And to be honest, some people, they just don't do well with nutritional intervention. And then we're just like, okay, so we might need to engage in another process that helps allostasis. And that's why the nutritional model that they've seen with all the functional medicine doctors that are running labs and doing protocols hasn't worked, is that it's out of the realm of nutrition. So it's nice as a clinician to know the difference. And that's part of what Nuvius offers.
So just to be super clear on this, first of all, Nuvius is not a seminar that's all just academic stuff, right? Learn all this information, neuroanatomy, different pathways, name and describe a test, but then go home without any practical skills. Like, for probably the last at least 5 years when I've taught the brain chemistry course, we'll break out into a kind of like a practical. I'll have everybody pair up and I teach everyone a basic vestibulocerebellar exam. And
Yeah.
people love it. Like they absolutely love it because it really drives home all the academic stuff. So this is what you're doing in the Nuvius model and in the seminars is it's, of course you have your academic part, but then you have the practical application where you're teaching people an exam process that just doesn't go, okay, now I have your exam findings and let me talk to you in a week about what we're going to do. It in the moment, you're doing a nutritional intervention and going back and repeating some things that were faulty on the exam to see if you can make immediate change.
Immediate.
This is gold. I love it. I absolutely love it.
And it's observation. You're allowing the brain to show you what works, and we don't have to figure everything out. And this is so beautiful. We can have a sense of what we want to try out, then we can work with the system and it will show us what will work. And this also helps us because we're working with the system towards what they would like with that as our stance, and not just reinforcing the problem.
You had mentioned earlier, you in the first day or first seminar, you teach 12 exams, 12 tests.
Yep.
I'm not going to ask you to go through them all, but can you walk us through just a couple?
Yeah.
And maybe even the mechanisms, the neural networks, the pathways, whatever level you feel comfortable sharing, just to give people kind of a taste. Like maybe pick two different things that you'll go through and talk about what you typically see. You probably can't really talk about what might work because it's going to vary from person to person.
Okay. Well, okay. Everybody at home, and maybe you, Steve, just stick your tongue straight out for me. Okay. So Steve's tongue goes just a little bit to the left originally. Okay. That's an exam finding. Okay. And that has to do with something called the medulla oblongata and the hypoglossal nerve. And that's where a lot of our automatic systems live. And when there's asymmetry in that system, it might just be there's a tongue issue, okay? Right? Okay, but it might also mean that there's asymmetry at the level of the medulla oblongata. I mean, we've all seen Waterboy. We know the significance of this. Okay, this is big, right? So, okay, well, what if this person has an asymmetry in how they regulate their autonomic nervous system? Wow, that's kind of a big deal because one side is going to have different information than the other side. And that lack of symmetry can create its own downstream stress effects. So like, for example, the left side, if it deviates to the left, that could be something around the left lower brainstem. Well, that could be the left vagus nerve. That's going to affect cardiac function, the SA node. It's going to affect the rate of cardiac function. It affects the top of the stomach. So people with acid reflux, some of them have the cardiac sphincter has low tone. That's going to affect the spleen on that side. So people with autoimmunity, they may not be able to dampen systemic inflammation because their spleen just isn't getting the signal from the vagus nerve. And so from that one finding, we can go, wow, if this person's sitting here with autoimmunity, acid reflux, and arrhythmia, maybe it's related. I don't know. Okay, maybe it is. But is it going to the left because there's a problem at that level? So many people with long COVID, the reason they have long COVID is because they got an infection through their sinuses or through their mouth, and they ended up with inflammation or neuroinflammation in their brainstem. So then they ended up with dysautonomia from this. Okay, so sometimes it's local, but sometimes the left brain, which fires into the left lower brainstem, isn't working. And there's a way to use exam findings to figure out if it's the left brain firing into the left brain stem or if it's just the left brain stem. And that's the idea of triangulating the level. Yeah. But hey, everybody, before you're starting to get overwhelmed, there's only 12 exam findings in the first entire weekend. 12. And half the time you get to practice it. And you're going to see it on multiple people. And then I'm also going to be bringing people up to the front of the room to help troubleshoot if things aren't going as planned. So it's pretty cool.
That is amazing. And so we talked about brainstem. You mentioned the frontal lobe. Mm-hmm. Are you going to walk people through the different lobes of the brain? Like, do you go through a basic neuroanatomy stuff? Or do you just keep it to, these are the exam findings, this is the part of the brain or the brainstem that's involved, let's go practice?
Yeah, I mean, the forms do help. So part of the course is understanding history a little bit, and then understanding forms a little bit, and then understanding how to objectively measure that with an exam, and then how to intervene. And I think that this is where this is not a 300 or 500 hour neuroanatomy course.
Yeah.
This is a clinical applications course. So I will give you the basics of what these regions are. I'll give you the names. I'll help you describe how to evaluate them. And more importantly, without having to dedicate yourself to 300 hours, you can master these basic exam findings, and many of your cases are going to respond so well to this. And then if it isn't happening based on what you learned with those 12 exam findings, you can always expand beyond that. And definitely in modules 2 and 3, I think there's another 18 between modules 2 and 3 exam findings. So we expand just a little bit from the foundation each module, but if all you did was attend module 1, you're going to be able to get the foundations of how to help with allostasis, and enough time to practice it, so Monday morning you know what to do.
Yeah. And just to define allostasis again, that is the process or the mechanism by which we establish homeostasis.
Yeah, the brain senses the environment. It's like a thermostat, right? So you got a thermostat on your wall. It goes, it's too cold. You hear a little click and the heat kicks on.
Yeah.
Okay, that thermostat, there's something like that in the brain called the hypothalamus. It senses all these different things like hormones and different types of acid and base balances. It looks for infections. It looks for immune signaling. It looks for different metabolites like
thyroid levels, glucose levels.
Yeah. Right. And it decides, I need more of this here. I need more of this here. But if it's got too many freaking things to manage, or the part of the brain that is designed to figure that out is diminished in function, then they're going to really struggle.
Yeah.
And these are the folks that have seen so many people. And even though they're seeing brilliant people that are doing the right thing for them, the allostatic mechanism did not engage. That's part of what's going on.
Yeah. So in terms of practical stuff, 12 tests in day 1. Mm-hmm. When someone brings this back to their, and let's assume someone can reasonably apply this, because these are skills, and you can do the same amount of work faster as you get better at doing this, right? So maybe it takes you 30 minutes the first time you do it, and then it's 25 minutes the second time. But reasonably, how long does it take, do you think, for the average clinician to perform an exam like this and to get the insight that your system offers them?
I mean, by the end of the weekend, it could be less than 5 minutes.
Yeah, it's pretty fast, isn't
it? Maybe 2 minutes. I mean, literally, like you can get so good at this that while you're talking to people, you can do more than half of it. So by the time your history is done, you can see a lot of these exam findings while they're talking and how they're moving. And so by the end, you're just like doing a couple things to confirm what you see is true. I mean, that's a level that is accessible to everybody.
Yeah, and I think that goes a long way to dispelling the myths of the complexity. Is like, I can't get into the brain because it's going to take too long to do this kind of stuff.
Yes, if you need to learn every exam finding, then yes, it is daunting. And by the way, I'd love it if you do that. Do it. Do all the courses, okay? But like, if you don't have time for that and you just want to understand the foundations of how the brain regulates the healing process, and that's what this course is about.
So this is, in one sense, it's a bridge into the bigger, broader world of functional neurology. But in another sense, it's kind of a standalone. This is another set of skills that you can master fairly quickly. And if you never go beyond that, you're still going to do better work than when you didn't do it.
I think you'll have an appreciation for how the brain is contributing to what's in front of you. So whether we call that better or worse, I would call it more comprehensive, but maybe not in a way that is like more taxing. It can just be so self-evident. Once you just like, remember when you learned like, oh, I see a high shoulder, or I see a reduced cervical curve, or I see like changes in the spine, like the way people are sitting and breathing. It's like, it's the same thing. It's like, but you can learn this so quickly that it just becomes part of your lens, that you see things almost automatically. But that can happen. Yeah,
for sure. This is awesome, Joe. This is wonderful. I know it's not easy writing seminars. What kind of challenges did you face on that? That's first of all, it's complex information, but it's a lot of material to hone down. You probably threw out as much material as you added to it at the end. Like, how did you go through the process of actually creating it?
It was a challenge because I have clinical practice,
Yeah.
and that's a busy practice. I also take a lot of seminars and doing a lot of personal development, have a life outside of work. So finding time for that, that was probably the biggest challenge, Also, I tried to go one direction with this course that involved another book as like the textbook. And we just had a lot of trouble getting the figures that we wanted to use, So I just went a totally different direction. And so that was almost a year to try to get like permission to use this book as a textbook. And we just had to let that go. So that was a big thing. The biggest challenge was organizing the exam and how to teach it in a way so that what we work with on day one doesn't make it harder to practice on day two. Yeah. So, for example, by the end of day two, most of your exam findings, if you're doing this, are probably going to be gone. It's that awesome. Okay. Now, the relevance of that to your chief complaint, your quality of life will reveal themselves as a result. Okay. Which is cool. But like if I taught day two on day one, then by the time we got to day two, there's no more exam findings left. So like I had to teach it in a way that is actually backwards. The least effective stuff that's still useful is taught at the beginning so that we can kind of get a sense of what will work and what won't work. But then there are definitely people that would benefit from like those interventions. And if you never learn them because everything else got better from the low hanging fruit, then you're still going to miss the allostatic mechanism in that patient. So the challenge was to assimilate the information in a way that was simple enough that people could learn it in a weekend, that organize it in a way so that they could have the educational experience that was useful, i.e. like we had to be strategic in how we taught. I had to be strategic in how I taught it so that on day two, they're still left to correct. Okay. And I also wanted to make it so they had enough time to practice and then ask questions. Yeah. And get their hands on like the actual supplements and get practice not only finding it, but then like intervening, trying things, but then also figuring out what dosing is. So half the seminar is practice. But guided practice, like focused practice. And I just feel like there's a lost art of this. Like there's this love affair with data, but there's this lost art of the exam. And people aren't doing exams because they're not as confident doing exams. And it's almost like we're almost led to believe it's not even important, because it's not even emphasized anymore. So, I mean, I sound like an old geezer. I mean, I've been doing this for 22 years and I feel like the art of the exam is what's missing. So like the hardest part was like not trying to reteach mastering brain chemistry or trying to reteach a thyroid seminar or trying to teach them about how to do actual functional neurology using exercises to help the brain, and to just really focus on the nutritional remedies, not having to do all of like the research explanation for how these remedies came to be, not having to do all the research explanation for how they came up with these lab tests, just like letting go of like explaining myself and just showing them, hey, listen, if you've done Apex, then you know this stuff, the labs are there, that the remedies are there, that they're well researched. Okay, well then what now? Cool. Those people are great. People that do chiropractic neurology already and functional neurology, they have never seen nutrition be used this way. No. Nutrition as a modality. And I think it could blow their mind. But if you're none of those things and you just want to know a little bit about nutrition to help somebody's range of motion and reduce their pain, did you know that the tongue, the hypoglossal nerve, lives right next to the spinal accessory nerve? So when people have a bit of a head tilt or they have a loss of range of motion, sometimes it's because of that asymmetry in the brainstem. And so the right remedy for that will make the adjustments work better. It'll make their neck more freer, and they'll be less guarded when you do your adjustment. And the top-down modulation of posture will stabilize them while you do your adjustment, and you'll have a longer lasting, more efficacious remedy for that person and a happy patient. Because the number one thing is like, well, how long does that last, doc? We want lasting care. Yeah, that was a diatribe.
That's all right. I get up on my own soapbox every once in a while.
Yeah.
Um, is this only like you mentioned that docs that know the Apex ecosystem
Yeah.
are going to catch on to this really quick and see the value really quickly? What about
Yeah.
people who might listen to the podcast and this interview and go, well, I've never been to an Apex seminar before. Is this something that they can just jump into right away and not get lost?
Yeah. All you have to do is be able to make observations, which I'll show you how to do and practice it. And then if at the end you want to learn more about like how neurotransmitters are made, if you want to learn more about different types of metabolic issues that'll affect this in more detail, and you like really love to dive into the research, and you like really love to know where the formulations are coming from, and you want to have the science backed proof of what you're doing so that you're not practicing a level of charlatanism, then great. Those seminars are available. And this is a clinical application course for those, but it also could be a standalone. Some people are not interested in learning all that, or they don't have time for it.
Yeah. Yeah. And ultimately at the end of the day, it's like if you go to a seminar, that doesn't change how you practice. It's just an academic exercise.
That's a lot of CEUs right now. But
that's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. So this is wonderful. All right, let me transition into parting words. So this is something I typically do with clinicians that I interview, is to kind of put yourself in the role of an advisor and talking to different people. So for example, let me just take them one at a time so I don't confuse you. If you were giving advice to a student in some healthcare discipline, and they're getting ready to graduate and go out into clinical practice, and they're like, I'm going to be the best clinician the world has ever seen, what do you tell them other than come take my Nuvius seminar?
I would say read the book The Path of Least Resistance by Robert Fritz, or get it on Audible. Learn how to be creative and create new structure and identify structural oscillating structures where people get better and then get worse, get better and then get worse, and learn how to get them off that. Yep. I would say study with NLP Marin. Carl Bouquet has an amazing online course that helps you understand metaprogramming, helps you understand how people model their world. And some people are modeling their world where they have a belief where they don't deserve to get better. Maybe they don't believe that they have needs. Maybe they believe that they're being persecuted by God. And if those beliefs are present and we miss that as a clinician, we're not going to be able to help them. And therapy doesn't always address that. So there are techniques and modalities out there that actually get to that level without having to engage in a long therapy or psychiatric process. So I would say those two things could be absolute foundations for their success as clinicians and for healthcare as a whole. I would love to see
as a whole. Yeah. And just to kind of go back into how important the brain is, like when people live in, and I can't remember the term that you just used, but they frame the context of themselves and their lives in such a way as to, they believe, maybe another way to say it was like sometimes people adopt their illnesses and it defines who they are. So it becomes part of them rather than something that's happening in them or to them. When people live in that state for a long enough period of time, it changes how the brain behaves. Right. And then, so we talked about, just to throw out some brain speak, we talk about maladaptive or negative plasticity. You alluded to this earlier, probably like 2 hours ago when we first started talking. And you I can't remember the terminology that you used, but the essence of negative plasticity is that the brain can get really good at doing things where the outcome is something that we don't want, whether it's chronic anxiety or chronic insomnia or a chronically disordered metabolism, right? And living in that place changes how the brain controls the hormonal system and controls the immune system, controls the gut, and so on.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the longer you're there, the longer a person is there, the more things they've tried and didn't work, the more helpless and hopeless they start to feel.
Yeah.
And so most people will go from like fighting like hell, pardon my French. And if they succeed, great. But if they're not succeeding or not lasting, then each time they lose a little bit of that power. And then a lot of times people turn to like a spiritual practice of not wanting, and that they accept that life is to suffer. Okay. And that's tough to work with. Okay. If they start to believe that the purpose of life is to suffer and that they chose to be here and that their karma is to work this out, and that's tough to work with. It's also tough to work with people that are really super focused on not getting something. Okay. Because they're stabilizing that structure. So,
And what you mean by that is, I'm so afraid of getting Alzheimer's. I'm so afraid of getting cancer that, as you say, crystallizes their structure. And that's the world they live in, is always trying to avoid something.
oh, I'm going to avoid sugar so that I don't, feed cancer cells.
Yeah.
Okay. And they're just focused on not feeding cancer cells. It's wild. And then furthermore, let's say somebody, this happens for sure. Okay. People, when they're children, something happens. Say, for example, I was raised in a household where people were taught that it's okay to let your baby cry out at night. Okay. Just let him cry. Eventually he'll stop crying. Okay. And some children that are crying out like that, and this isn't like calling out parents or anything, but what if that child with like zero frontal lobe, who doesn't really understand they're separate from their mother, makes some decision about whether they are going to die if they're alone? Okay. Or maybe they don't deserve, like their needs no longer matter. So they regulate by trying to numb themselves out. And so isn't it like really useful to have a really brilliant doctor that you believe in, and then you try something and then it doesn't work, and then it reinforces that deep belief that you're just going to suffer and that you actually didn't deserve to get better because you were left? I mean, I know that's not rational, but there's a part of the brain that is only charged with like keying for survival. It doesn't care how great life is. And so if those survival instincts and those patterns take over, then that will determine the stress chemistry of that person. They may look at life as like dangerous. They may look at life as something they need to control instead of something that they can participate in and enjoy.
Yeah, it's totally different mindset.
Yeah.
All right. Second person you're giving advice to is someone who's been in practice for a while, but let's say they're new to functional medicine, functional neurology. What advice do you give them?
Okay. Well, if you're new to functional medicine and functional neurology, I think Dr. Datis Karazian has put together courses that marry those two things well, either through Apex Energetics and something called the Karazian Institute. I think those are wonderful courses. The Carrick Institute has an amazing, thorough functional neurology program. Dr. Sam Yannick has an amazing functional immunology program, about 1 to 6 immune cells for every neuron in the brain. Okay. So like understanding immunology can be really important, but I would say pick the one that you're most interested in, maybe that you know the least about, get good at that, and then go on to the next one. Certainly my course can be helpful in terms of like accelerating your clinical prowess and being able to tie those things together in a more functional way.
Yeah, all those things. And I would add in Rob Malillo's work.
Oh,
the
yes.
Method.
Yes, totally.
Those are all super deep dives.
Yes.
And like I said earlier, yours is kind of a bridge into that world, but people can take that step and never go into the deep dive if they don't want to, but they'll still come out being a better clinician on the other end. And then finally, the person who is a seasoned practitioner who maybe thinks that they've already reached the pinnacle of their understanding of human metabolism.
Oh boy. Yeah. I don't know. Is that person open to suggestion?
Yeah. Let's say they are. Let's say that you can do something to get them to see that there is a whole world of things that they don't know that they don't know.
Boy.
I know that's the hardest one.
I guess it depends on where they're at. Okay. So if they're awesome at neurology already, understanding how beliefs influence neurology is super important. If they're awesome at functional medicine, understanding more about the brain and cross training. If you're good at both of those things, Dr. Yannick's immunology program is wonderful. But if you like I said, I think my program's pretty cool. Okay. If you're looking for a way to like take what you already know and run it through the system and see what the system decides, rather than having to figure everything out, it's so nice not to have the pressure of figuring everything out.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah. So like module 1 is kind of the stuff that we talked about. It's going to be brainstem and frontal lobe and cerebellum. And so we're kind of getting the core of the allostatic mechanism. But module 2, we're getting into more exam findings. We're getting into blood pressure responses, and basically part 2 of neuroinflammation, which technically is part 1. If you can reestablish blood flow, a lot of the neuroinflammation gets better.
Right.
That leads into a little bit of discussion of dysautonomia, and then something called neurogenic inflammation, which is different than neuroinflammation, which is a totally underappreciated topic. That's going to be rounding out module 2. And then module 3 gets into the gut-brain connection. So like, let's say you try the neuroinflammation stuff, or you try things for like neurotransmitters, and the brain just isn't changing, but they have a history of SIBO, or they have a history of leaky gut, or non-celiac or celiac, and they have section 2 of the metabolic assessment form, or section 1. You could open a capsule of Enterovite and put it on the tongue, and then like 30 seconds later, you see the neurological exam finding changes. So this is like showing this is a gut-brain issue, not a brain-gut issue. You can also do things like, C-Biotica, or you just figure out what supplement is going to move the needle on the top down, and you just include that. It doesn't take the place of the lab testing and what you're going to do for the labs, but it allows you to evaluate that allostatic top-down mechanism and at least include that in your therapy, which is really cool. And then we're also getting into systemic factors. So we're going to get a little bit into homocysteine and like blood-brain barrier. We're going to get into the blood sugar part of that, the hypoglycemia part of that. We're going to be testing like phytobrain E and things that are more like essential fats for the brain. And then understanding, okay, if the fat is helping, then we do need to go, look, if the fat doesn't work, you do need to understand like the north to south, like digestion model that Dr. Krasian has. And, you have to understand that, because it might be that the exam finding changes, but like you're not moving the needle over time. And so it just opens the doorway to how that more comprehensive model can work for that one thing, but you at least have to know what you're trying to fix.
Yeah. I think I love what it seems to me is that you've taken essentially all the major components of the Mastering Brain Chemistry course, created correlating exam and intervention approaches to give the practical stuff.
Yeah.
Without getting lost in the weeds.
Totally. That's just it. I mean, if you're a muscle testing doctor, like I love muscle testing, and these are standardized exam findings. So we're making the observation. We're not influencing the test as much. Either it's there or it isn't. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so, but it's more than just mastering brain chemistry. It's also like looking at mastering functional blood chemistry. Okay, just understanding how blood sugar and anemias. I mean, we're going to get into some of that in the systemic part. We're definitely going to. We could start incorporating in later modules more of cogence and doing bedside challenges for cogence.
The immune system.
Bedside challenges for TH17. Bedside challenges. So we might need more formulations, like something like elderberry to stimulate a TH17, which would be cool. And so you got to be really careful with these, right? And so, but there's going to be more clinical discussion about that. But like, how do we know if like somebody gets a fever after we do allostasis, that's necessarily a bad thing?
That's right.
You know what I mean? So it's really, we do need to spend a little more time on the clinical application aspect of that, but there's such a beautiful clinical application of cogence that goes beyond labs. And it's not that the labs are bad, but like, wow, there is a clinical application here where you can figure out, okay, does glycoberberine affect this, or does glycoberberine MX affect this? For this person, it's MX. Okay, that's the one we sent him home with. We just get that little bit of extra information, and for whatever reason, that worked.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Dr. Joe Smith, I've thoroughly enjoyed our time together today. I appreciate you taking time out of your day to have a chat with me.
Thank you. It was awesome to be here.
Do you have a rollout date yet for the first seminar?
Oh, yes. It's the middle of July in Scottsdale.
Okay.
And then I think the last weekend in July is going to be here in the Bay Area. And then we have, I think the actual dates are going to be released on May 1st. So I think we so far have 25 events between now and next May. So we're definitely going to be coming to your area.
Where can people find you and find information on Nuvius seminars?
Nuvius seminars will be on the Apex Seminars website.
ApexSeminars.com.
Yep. And I think it may be getting its own website. I probably should have the answer for that.
That's all right. It's a fluid state.
Yeah, totally. My clinic is called Atlas Health. And so I'm just north of San Francisco. So I have a website, Atlas Health Method, or drjoesmith.com. That's where to find me.
Yeah. And I'll put all your links, social included. I'll put that in the episode description so people can find you pretty easily. Mm-hmm. All right, my brother. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks, Steve.
All right.